Item 4 then is a report on the road safety, and I know there's a number of strands within the report, and I'm going to hand over to you now to talk us through that.
So just by way of introduction, we have several items on the agenda today, all of which are quite detailed reports. So I'm going to invite, in the first instance, Tim on this particular report, just to give a very brief summary of what the key issues are. I know that you've had the opportunity to go through the papers, Commissioner, and then perhaps take any questions in relation to each of the papers. So if we start off with road safety, Tim is obviously our operational lead. Tim.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. So the first paper's on road safety. Just a tiny bit of context. Obviously, West Yorkshire Police are responsible for the road network in West Yorkshire, covering an area of 2,029 square kilometres, and that's includes one of the busiest motorway networks in Europe, with 213 miles of carriageway. Just in terms of numbers, in March 2010, the force employed 342 traffic officers. Following restructures, that went down initially to 3 hubs that were based at Bradford, Leeds and Wakefield, and then there was a further restructuring again in July 2014, where we ended up with the structure we have now. We have in total deployed in safer roads and neighbourhoods 175 police constables, 20 police sergeants, 5 inspectors and 5 chief inspectors. And just to try and clarify a little bit, 120 of those could be considered pure roads policing officers, those that have completed the full traffic law, advanced driving and TPAC, tactical pursuit and containment training. There are a few vacancies at the moment, and we are looking to increase those as student officers arrive in districts, and therefore districts are able to release those officers to us. I'm glad to say we've got 8 in the last couple of weeks, so there are those new people coming through. The SRAMs currently work a 5-team rota, which ends up being that the maximum number we'll get out at one time is 35 police constables. I'll just highlight a couple of things, if I may. The fatal 4 offences are obviously those that are proven to be the cause of most collisions, and they're speed, drink and drugs, the non-wearing of seat belts, and it's actually distraction, but everybody thinks of it as the use of mobile phones at the wheel. But those are the 4, and obviously their focuses for our enforcement activity. Page 3 runs through some of the numbers there. I don't propose to go through the numbers for this meeting unless you've got any questions on them, but as you can see, there's a considerable number, or the vast majority of those issued are those by our roads policing officers. And just to note also that tackling drug driving, we've now been able to use the drug wipes that have been passed out to the safer roads and neighbourhood support officers, so that allows officers to obtain a roadside preliminary drug test, as we do with breast tests at the scene. So that's available to all those officers now. If I can move on to then page 4, which talks about Operation Steerside. As you're aware, Commissioner, this is a target operation in Bradford District that's a joint operation between ourselves Operations and Bradford District to combat the perceived bad driving issues that have been highlighted to us. We dedicate officers daily to proactively enforce the roads policing legislation, and I mentioned the fatal 4. We use some good analysis to put them in the right places, and we use speed enforcement equipment, fingerprint devices that are available in the cars and in-car CCTV, both to identify offences and offenders. The interactions are recorded, and hopefully you'll have seen the positive news stories for Operation Steerside, which we've been promoting in the media. And just a couple of numbers there. Since the start of Steerside in February 2016, there was a total of 636 vehicles have been seized for insurance, driving licence offences or antisocial use of the vehicle. But there have been, and I think this is an impressive figure, 7,375 actions, which can vary from people being arrested, reported for summons or issued with fixed penalty notices, but that's a substantial number. Has that had any impact? We believe it has. If you look at the force performance statistics, damage only collisions have reduced. and serious injury collisions have reduced, and the latter by 16%, although unfortunately we have seen a slight rise in the number of slight injury RTCs. But I do think that the figures show there has been a positive impact in Bradford, both in perception terms but also in real hard numbers. The next bit of the report simply highlights the proactivity that takes place within protective services operations. So there's a list there about the number of stop searches that are conducted by those officers, but also impressively an arrest rate which remains above 15% pretty much month on month, which again is a figure that the Home Office do look at. Above 15% tends to be a good proportion of arrests, so good use of the stop and search power there. I'll also highlight the number of intelligence submissions. This is a figure I'm quite proud of. 29.6% of the force's total intelligence submissions come from protective services operations staff in this year to date, which is a phenomenal amount for those officers. So I think it just demonstrates their proactivity. One of the new tools that we're obviously making the most use of is ANPR. And as you're aware, we've had a significant investment thanks to the money provided in ANPR since 2015. Again, why do we do this? Because the use of the strategic node network is integral to the commission of most serious organised crime, and you can see links between low-level traffic offences and other types of criminal activity. In short, it's worth us targeting those people because that is a way of engaging with all levels of criminality. So we've now 300 static cameras, 66 vehicles with the capability, and there are 4.5 million reads a day, just to give you the quantity of data that's being used. And again, in the last year, that was responsible for 1,057 arrests and the recovery of 453 vehicles, as well as the location of 13 people who were missing. Just to move finally then on to the closed pass scheme, which I know has been raised by people. This is a West Midlands scheme which seeks to address drivers not allowing sufficient room for cyclists when they pass too closely. When we look at the highway code, it doesn't give us a figure, but it just says give vulnerable road users as much space as you would a car. West Midlands have nominated 1.5 metres as that safe distance, and they've looked to educate and then prosecute drivers on the back of that. They've even almost deployed an officer on a pedal cycle who will then radio in when somebody comes too close. So that works in certain areas of the road network. Analysis in West Yorkshire indicates that most of our cycling collisions occur at busy junctions on the main A roads. So not necessarily would the close pass fit. However, there may be near misses that we're not aware of. So we're looking to make it easier to report bad driving so that people can upload footage directly through to us automatically, and a local cycling group have volunteered to look at how that might work. And we're also going to trial a close pass scheme which we think will run from May 2017 in the northwest area of Leeds, and particularly around the A660, which is one of our hotspots for cycling collisions. If there is that significant impact, we'd obviously then look to widen that out. I think the only other thing I missed out in the report that I would want to mention is that since we've had the uplift of armed response officers, we're also deploying them where circumstances allow to look at road safety as well. So we're maximising all the assets available to us to look at that. And finally, the future. Thankfully, for myself at operations, we've got an additional 25 officers coming to join SRAMS in this financial year, and we're looking to reintroduce an intercept resilience, so an impact team to target specific force level road safety issues. I hope that's not too brief a run through, but that's a run through of the report that's quite detailed, and if there's anything you want to come back to me on, I welcome questions.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Tim, for that update and report. Yes, just one or two follow-up questions on this then. So, you've mentioned there about the business of firearms officers being deployed into some of these scenarios. Could you just say a little bit more around what type of deployments that might constitute?
Yeah, the uplift of firearms officers came following Paris 2 attack, and it means that we're allowed to increase the number of armed response vehicles that are available to us on each shift. They're double crewed by nature, and they have to be, so it's about using them in the best areas that we can in support of the other SRANS officers. So the bit we've got to avoid is that they don't get tied up in case there's a firearms response. So we use them at sort of low level, I don't like that word, but more minor collisions. We use them to enforce traffic offences, and they can also be involved in TPAC pursuits, and I've got numerous examples of where they've been involved in detaining people for stolen motor vehicles. I suppose the other line is, if there's a marked police vehicle out there, we don't want to ignore what's in front of them, because that really would be seen as bad to the public.
Yeah, so basically it's any kind of deployment where we know we can release them swiftly,
Yep.
should we need to.
Yep.
And obviously supporting road safety initiatives is a really good option
Yeah.
in terms of those kind of duties.
Okay. So it's adding a bit more capacity
Absolutely.
when appropriate.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it allows us to be more proactive on the roads as well, because they're in a fast vehicle, and they are by nature proactive officers as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that clarification on that. In the table, it says that there's a category of other in terms of some of the offences. Could you just say a bit more about that?
I think that relates to the fatal 4, doesn't it? But other, at the end of the day, is failed to provide offences. So there are two elements to that. That's failed to provide a preliminary test at the roadside, or it's failure to provide an evidential specimen in custody when people have been asked to. So it'll be relate to the over-prescribed limit and drink drive arrests.
Yeah. There's 921 offences logged against that. So obviously, there's a few different ones within there. Then.
Yeah, I think it's things that don't.
It's page 4. Sorry.
It's things that don't fit in the fatal 4 category. So
The
it's
bottom of
everything.
page 4.
It's everything
Yeah.
else
Right, yes. Sorry.
that our SRANS officers are dealing with that sits outside those fatal 4. So it could be a whole variety of things, of which Tim's quite right. It could be failure to provide, but it could be a series of other offences.
My apologies. The failure to provide refers to the drink drive table up above, because there is another in that category as well, and those are there specifically. But Chief's absolutely right. That's anything that doesn't fit into those 4 that we would be prosecuted for.
Sorry, well, I assumed that you were talking about
because
the bottom table, not the top
there's
one.
2
Yes,
others
sorry.
on that
Yeah.
on page 4, so my fault.
Yeah. I just wondered if that number continues to grow, whether it might be worthwhile breaking that down a little bit more.
Certainly, we can give you
Yeah.
some more additional information.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to have some synergy with the reporting about the kind of campaigns that we've been having with the public, and we've talked quite on a number of occasions about the fatal 4. But again, if you want some further information about what some of those others are, then we can certainly give that to you.
I would expect them to be things like failing to comply with a traffic signal, failing to comply with a red light, along those lines.
Yeah, sure. Also on page 4, I mean, clearly Operation Steerside, as you've said, has been, a success, I think, and the numbers of vehicles that have been seized, as you've said, more than 7,000 people and actions actually that have been done throughout that Operation Steerside period. It's, I guess, the view around the sustainability of this approach.
We are looking to sustain it, yes. We have found some money to allow us to do that in the first quarter of next year, and the newly appointed Chief Inspector in charge of it, Chris Corkindale, one of his missions is how do we make that sustainable. The issue we've got will be if everybody wanted Steerside all at the same time, so we've got to prioritise, but we can find the resource to do that in the first part of next year, and I think it would be wrong for us just to immediately stop doing it.
I think this is a really good example where representatives of the community have come forward, shared their thoughts and concerns with us, I think it would be fair to say that there have been some concerns around driving practice in Bradford. We do recognise that actually with community support we would rather people were driving properly and sensibly and appropriately rather than committing offences, but where they do, we do need to deal with them. In terms of sustainability, one of the opportunities that we do have because of bringing new people into the organisation is part of a student officer's profile that they have to be able to complete is to be able to demonstrate that they can deal with road traffic offences. So not only will it be Tim and his dedicated team being able to address some of these issues, but actually we should be able to encourage more officers who are district based to also start dealing with more road safety matters.
And if I can just add as well, this is one of also the issues that we're looking at through the partnership, as well as about how we can make it sustainable, because as the Chief says, it's but one part of it. So how can we utilise everybody else as well in the partnership to tackle the issues?
And again, you know, if members of the public are watching this coverage later and want to give us some further information around vehicle behaviour, vehicle driving, then we would encourage them to report that into us so we can take some action.
Yeah, no thanks. And again, you're probably aware that when we go out to engage in person and through surveys, that road safety is pretty much always within the top two issues that are raised. So, but I accept that these things, in my view, are best tackled at a local level, because Bradford is the example in this case where you're right, there has been some horrendous examples of dangerous driving and sadly fatalities that have occurred. So it's absolutely right, there's been a concentrated effort there. And obviously the local newspaper and lots of others have supported that campaign. But I guess it's given, you also mentioned the number of vehicles now equipped with ANPR and the number of cameras that we do have at the various points around West Yorkshire. Again, it's making the most of the new technology that we are investing in. So the question is, I guess, around the footage that you also talked about being potentially being able to be sent in at some point. Have you got a time scale around that?
I don't at the moment, I'm afraid, Commissioner. So we are looking at getting a platform so that it can come direct into us. At the moment, people have to actually hand in a hard copy, and that does happen quite often at Bradford at the moment, but it's how we can do it through technology. Interestingly, the roads policing officers now have got a new system that we're just trialling where we don't have to download anything. It's automatically picked up from the car onto the computer. Yep. And obviously if that works, then we'll come back to you and talk more about that. But we are looking at every way we can to make this digitally transferable and reduce the amount of work it takes to process it in the future.
So there's two issues here, Commissioners. Yep. The footage that we film,
yep,
which we're fairly confident we've got a good process in place, yep, now, and then there is the huge plethora of footage, yes, that the public can film. And so first of all, we've got to have a suitable IT platform, yep, and secondly, we've got to find ways of being able to ensure that the provenance of that evidence is of a suitable standard for any court processes or indeed anything else. So that basically means that we have got some work to do through the Road Safety Partnership, and I do think that this would be a really good example of where we are able to reinvest into road safety, and then encourage the members of the public to have the confidence to send things through to us.
Absolutely, yes, and obviously because most people now carry a handheld device of some description or another, there has to be sort of realistic expectations set, I guess, as well, regarding the amount of footage that could potentially be sent in and then looked at. So there are a whole host of things to consider.
There are, and I think it's probably quite a difficult one to explain to members of the community about the need for the evidence to be able to pass forensic standards. So whilst on the one hand, absolutely, it is relatively straightforward about recording something, perhaps on a mobile phone, but then we've got to be able to demonstrate that that is the pure evidence that has been recorded at the time and that it hasn't been interfered with in any way. So it is quite a difficult problem, but not an insurmountable one, and we're already having some of those conversations across the country, in fairness, not just here.
Yeah. Okay.
And some of it we'd obviously want to use to educate people, as
Absolutely.
you know, rather than just enforcement as well. How can we prevent the activity in the future?
Yeah. I was really making the point as well that the increase in the number of vehicles with ANPR capability, which I think is a great thing, myself, being out personally with some of the officers, does mean that we are, increasing that sort of overall road safety
Absolutely.
analysis and impact.
I suppose the last thing on that, just the amount of data that's coming in now, we're I think at the cutting edge of learning how to use it. So in the paper, and I didn't mention this on camera before, but we've just invested in a further analyst and research capability so that we can understand that data better. We use it lifetime, we can use it retrospectively, and the results are growing exponentially. So yes, we hope to see more and more from that in the future.
I think the important key safety message to the public is that the majority of our marked vehicles will now have this capability, as will a significant number of our unmarked vehicles.
Right.
So if somebody is going to engage in inappropriate driver behaviour, there may be an increasing likelihood that we will be stopping them and we will be dealing with them in the future.
Right. Sorry, and just finally, you talked about the close pass scheme that's been done in the West Mids area. Yes, as we know, there are a number of cycling groups who have been contacting both this office and West Yorkshire Police, and I'm pleased that we have a local group that are prepared to get involved in trialling this out in that area of Leeds, which I look forward to seeing the outcomes of. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.